All right, I think finally I solved my own technical difficulties. Thank you everyone for joining us today. There are more and more people joining us as we move through. I'll give it a couple more minutes. I think some may be having the same difficulties that I'm having. I just ask everyone who's waiting to mute their phones or mute their computers, please. All right. My own technical difficulties. Thank you everyone for listening today. I did. Oh, okay, I heard you. Okay. And now can you hear me again? Okay, I think we might be ready. If somebody in the chat box could give me a thumbs up and let me know they can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have quite a number of people on the line today, and I'm sure there might be a whole host of questions that you may have about where we're at. Today is July 1st. We have a tradition in my household. I think it came from a Nickelodeon program about 20 years ago, where the first person to say rabbit, rabbit on the first day of the month in a household had the good luck for the month. And so I am happy to report that all three of my adult sons living all across the state, from different corners of the state, I was the first one to text them this morning and say rabbit, rabbit. And so I am hoping that I secured good luck for public school systems in North Dakota for the whole month of July, because that's how I hope that we're going to be able to use this and be able to need as much luck as we can to get us through a very short timeline again. I can hardly believe that the last time we talked, we were talking about concluding schools and how are we going to close out and graduations and so many other things that were that dealt with how we would be able to finish out our school year. And now fast forward, here we are, July 1st, and I believe our conversation today will be dominated by the conversation about how will we return to school, what will learning look like this fall, and where are we at in that decision-making process. So just to begin our update today, I want to share with you that 2 weeks ago, it was actually 2 weeks ago yesterday, a group of people met. Those people included members from your organization, the North Dakota School Boards Association, North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders, that is the association like yours for superintendents and principals, as well as the Teachers Association, ND United, met with state representatives from the governor's office, Department of Public Instruction, and Department of Health to have a conversation about what would be needed to by our local school leaders in order for them to feel empowered to make decisions at the local level about what they might do to reopen school or begin the learning of their school year in 2020-21 for that school year. So again, the question was, what do our local school district leaders need from the state in order to feel empowered with information and empowered with authority in order to make decisions about this coming school year, the 2021 school year? The answer to that question really was 3 parts. Number one, they needed from the state the extended executive authority from our governor to allow distance learning to count for instructional time for the purposes of foundation aid payments. As you know, North Dakota Century Code does not allow distance learning to count for instructional time, number of hours, without the governor's executive authority giving us that very specific authority. We don't have a state law or state statute that allows distance learning, virtual learning to count for time for foundation aid. So the very first thing that our school leaders, School Boards Association, Teachers Association, and Superintendents Principals Association said they needed was an extension of the authority, because some of our schools, many of our schools that want to have at least all of the options on the table. They want to have the opportunity to say we are going 100% in-person learning, we're going 100%, will remain 100% virtual learning, distance learning, or a hybrid of the two. They want the opportunity to have all of those options on the table. And in order for that to continue, the governor's executive authority or version thereof must remain in place. So that was the first thing they needed. The second thing that they needed was a set of conditions, some guidance about what would be expected from our schools to have in place in order for them to open up for in-person instruction this fall. So a guidance document that allows for them to have a certain set of parameters of expectations based on very specific criteria, such as what is the number of confirmed cases in our county or our community? What is the age of those confirmed cases? What is the contact tracing capacity within our community or county? And so with that, those were the two things that they said that they needed. And that was pretty clear cut. So at the end of that meeting 2 weeks ago, two things happened. The state committed to working with the governor's office on a document that would extend the executive order with expectations for distance learning plans. We worked with the governor's office on that, and we're still in the middle of working out the details and the executive authority. At the end of that meeting on June 23rd, a group of leaders from the field, principals, superintendents, teachers, and school board members agreed to work on a document that they could present to the Department of Health, the state health officer, who is Dr. Andrew Stahl, for him to respond to on what they felt would be necessary and doable for local school districts to make their decisions on. Last week, Thursday morning, which was June, oh my goodness, no, I'm so sorry. It was, 2 weeks ago, June 16th is when we had the initial meeting. Last week, Thursday, June 25th, we received from the field from the task force, as I said, School Boards Association, NDCEL, and ND United, provided to the state a document of expectations and conditions that they felt would be helpful, including the parameters and guidelines based on the governor's color-coded for the 5 phases of returning to phased-in approach. That we gave that to Dr. Stahl and his epidemiologist team at the Department of Health, and they are currently working on what they can live with, what needs to be changed, or what they need to add to that document. I had a call this morning with our governor's office, and we hope that we will have some final recommendations and final feedback from the Department of Health by the middle of next week, which then puts us into July 8th. After we have that conversation with the Department of Health, and he has provided to the Department of Public Instruction the feedback that they believe is necessary in order for the Department of Health and their local public health units to be comfortable as a set of conditions and parameters, we'll then meet with the governor to determine what his expectations are. And at that point, as soon as possible after we meet with the governor, we'll pull that multi-diverse group of people together back again and share the governor's recommendations and share the Department of Health, state health officers' requirements and expectations with that task force group to continue to come to a workable document that can be utilized by our school districts so our school districts can begin to make decisions about this fall. We hope to have that document, both the health and safety plan document and the distance learning plan expectations, to our school districts, our local school districts, by mid-July, so our local school districts can then begin working with their communities, their faculty, their staff, their students, and their families to develop a plan for the 2021 school year by our districts. So that's a lot. The North Dakota High School Activities Association has constituted their own committee, a return to competition committee, that is also waiting on this documents, because we anticipate that the activities, athletics, and competitions will be guided by the North Dakota High School Activities Association guidance. And they want to align theirs to the governor's and the Department of Public Instruction, Department of Health guidance as closely as possible. So with that, again, I'm relying on your questions to guide the rest of this conversation so I can make sure that I'm answering everything that is burning out there. And through your questions, I'm able to identify what needs to be addressed by our office and other state agencies. So I'm hoping that we can have quite an interactive conversation. So I know, number one, what your initial reaction is to this idea and this process. Number two, so I can be sure to take your concerns and your needs to the other state leaders, because that's what we're here for. We're here to serve you. So questions either in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself, remembering that you may need to unmute yourself and *6. Question, do you view the decision to reopen this fall for in-person instruction to be a local decision at this point in time? It is my desire to put as much of the decision-making authority in our local school board's hands as possible. That is initially the draft that we put forward. I believe it will be a local decision in concert with the public health units within your local communities. Whether or not that's the final version that our state health officer and our governor feel is appropriate is yet to be determined. But yes, it is my opinion that as much of this decision-making authority needs to lie in the hands of our local school board members who are elected by their community members in concert with the local public health units.
Kirsten?
Yes.
This is Rebecca Knudsen from the Fargo School Board.
Hi, Rebecca.
I thank you so much for providing us with this information today. And I know that the call is being recorded, so I can go back and refer to your comments. But what I'm wondering is there an opportunity for this timeline that you provided to us is wonderful and very planful and of course aggressive. I'm wondering if there is a way that we can receive I guess a write-up as far as that plan. I'd like to be able to refer to that, you know, the kind of the deadlines and the steps that you're taking.
Certainly.
So that's just an idea in terms of if there's the ability to publish that information or send that out as a follow-up to this. And then the other thing, something we've been talking about here in Fargo, of course, and just helping everyone understand that, and the governor too, to communicate that different school boards throughout the state, and I know you know this, have different governing models. And so some of this information goes directly to the school boards to make decisions, and others, you know, the school boards like in Fargo have more of the governance model,
right,
where the decisions are made more directly through administration and doesn't necessarily come to us for approval, but comes to us for to provide us with information and the opportunity for us to ask questions. So I think sometimes there gets to be confusion among the public in terms of when do boards make decisions and when do they not and why. So anything that you can do to help just continue to communicate that information in terms of how different decisions are made across the state and different school districts would be helpful. And I just wanted to share that comment with you, and thank you so much for your leadership.
Rebecca, thank you as well for your leadership, and thank you for those two important points. I am a visual learner as well, and so I can hear a timeline, but when I am able to see a timeline with some processes and procedures, that's very helpful. So I can appreciate very much the request to have the expected timeline, backtracking the historical perspective of when we met as a task force on June 16th through the mid-July. We can certainly, we will definitely create that and share that with our school board members, share that with the School Board Association, and post that on our COVID-19 website so people can stay up to date. So thank you for that. And also thank you for the reminder about the different governance. Yes, each school board is unique and has its own distinct personality and best ways of operation and operationalizing the work that they do. And you're right, there are some, like Fargo, that does have the governance model. With that, there are certain things, even as you know, even at, that are required by federal law and state law to have school board approval. I'm not sure where the governor will land on what will be necessary. It may be explicit that in order to return to face-to-face that they would want a final official school board approval, or he may say in consultation with, or including, including faculty, school board, public health. I'm not sure where the governor will lie on that, but I will be certain to certainly inform and express the experiences that all school boards are different and unique in their operations. So I will be sure to note that. And then if he being the governor would like explicit approval, we'll be certain to be clear about that, so those board members aren't left in a flux of trying to decide whether it fits in their governance model while trying to satisfy the governor's executive order. So thank you. If a local school board decides to do a portion under a distance learning platform, will each school district need to submit another distance learning plan to be approved prior to the fall? So I believe, again, this is all speculation, and nothing is certain, but I will give you what I know at this point in time. So if a school district would want to continue to operate with some sort of distance learning platform for some of their students, or for all of their students some of the time, or all of their staff, if they would want to at any point leverage that distance learning option for the purposes of receiving foundation aid, I do anticipate that the governor will ask that each school district review their distance learning plan that they submitted this spring and update or make any improvements that would be helpful based on what was learned this past spring. I personally do not anticipate that those plans will need to be resubmitted for approval by the governor's office. Last time, the distance learning plan, as you remember, needed to be submitted to the Department of Public Instruction for initial review, and then submitted and forwarded on to the governor's office for approval. I don't anticipate that a process like that will need to be approved or repeated, excuse me, but I do anticipate that the governor will want our local school districts to review their distance learning plans and make improvements based on lessons learned and additional things revealed and uncovered from the initial submission. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Any other questions or thoughts or suggestions or things that you'd want me to keep in mind as we move forward through this work? Anything, everything on the table.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can. Yes.
Hi, my name is Tracy Newman. I am a newly elected board member to Fargo Public Schools as well. I just had a question, maybe others are wondering too. Is it still possible to become a part of this task force? I'm a pediatrician and I have a master's degree in public health, and I would just be really interested in helping contribute to this. Is that still possible, or is it a closed group?
So thank you. Very good question. And first of all, let me congratulate you. Thank you for running. Thank you for being committed to your school district and your community. As a former school board member myself for almost a decade for Mandan Public Schools, I can tell you it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my entire life. So thank you for that. And be sure to rely on your North Dakota School Boards Association as you move through this. They're a wonderful group and a wonderful organization. So with that, the answer to your question, the task force that was created was actually created by a grassroots group of people. And I would just look to Alexis Baxley, who is representing the North Dakota School Boards Association on that task force, to determine how you might become involved. I will say one thing about the task force and the work. At this point in time, we've just learned from our North Dakota, from our Assistant Attorney General that's been assigned to the Department of Public Instruction, there were numerous requests for the work document, the working papers, if you will, by our media. So we've had open records requests to turn over all of our notes, all of our ideas, all of our suggestions, all of our like brainstorming ideas. And we have to do that because we're a public entity, just as you do as a school board and school board members in public schools. But it got to be an enormous, as you can imagine, we've been working on this since about May 1st, just sharing ideas, sharing other states' plans, sharing comments, sharing articles that we've read about best practices, really essentially living and breathing this for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And so the media request, the open records request, allowed us, became quite expensive. And so they backed away from that request and they said, but give us the initial draft that you're working on with the state health department and the governor's office. And so we had to check with our attorney general, our assistant attorney general assigned to us, and say, if we understand, we truly want to be as transparent as we possibly can and as open and honest and as inclusive of as many groups. But the thing about it is, if it comes out in a newspaper report or a nightly news story, you're going to have people all over the board. Some people really, really want masks. Some people really, really don't want masks. Some people really, really want to start in person. Some people really, really don't want to start in person. And there's so much emotion that is surrounding this issue that we felt that if we could keep it, if we could have as much of it decided before it began being speculated about in our news media, and the media actually understood that. So right now it is a working document, which allows us to not be able to, this will obviously be open to public record and our media will be able to access this. But as far as the specifics of the document, our Attorney General recommended that until we're ready for it to be published in the newspaper and have all sorts of public comment on it, that we not solicit it to a broad group of people. So that's kind of the background and a long story, a long answer to your very simple question. But I would just encourage you to reach out to your association director, Alexis Baxley, and any other members of that group that represent you to see how you might become involved. And they may be able to share gather your comments, because that's really important for us to get our school board members' perspective and those people that are elected in our broader community. But I would at this point say we're probably going to have to keep it a little tighter so we don't have an alarmist reaction to what is only a working set of papers right now. But again, congratulations, Tiffany. Did I get your name right, or did I forget? What was your name, first name?
Tracy, thank you very much.
Tracy. Thanks, Tracy. I look forward to meeting you.
Hi, Kirsten. This is Judy Lee. Go ahead.
Hey, Judy.
Hi there. I have done dozens of these, but for some reason I'm having tech problems today too. So I'm watching your face on my laptop and listening to you on my phone. I think it's really important for everybody to know that aside, and please, I'm asking you to respond to this. But aside from extending the executive order, which deals with the acceptability of online learning, the rest of the decisions in large part are up to you as an elected person and the school board members as elected people. It doesn't all have to be the same. The governor does not have the right to tell all of you how to do it, as long as it's within the parameters of the health department and what you all discuss what's going on. So, you know, one size does not have to fit all here is my point. I've just gone through weeks of this with visitation in skilled care facilities and assisted living facilities. And I understand what you're saying about some people wanting everything shut down, other people wanting everything opened up. It's the same thing with school. Is it going to be all online? Is it going to be all in person? So it'll be important to have everybody's voices in there and recognize the importance of the collaboration, which I know you're already doing. But there is autonomy available to the people in the various school districts, and especially those of you who live in rural areas that have had almost no COVID cases or none at all. Your rules can be different for your districts than what those of us living in Cass County have. And unless something strange happens, that should be able to be the way it is. It shouldn't have to be the same everywhere. So I would suggest that you advocate for that as well.
Senator Lee, I appreciate your comments as always and your wisdom and experience. And, you know, you haven't been through a COVID pandemic before, but you've been through many policy things and many challenges as a state leader. So thank you for joining us and thank you for those comments. And I would say you and I are tracking the same. So I think that there, you know, as you talk about tight and loose, what I envision is that I believe that as a former school board member myself, there are certain things that you must have in place. How you do it is up to our school district. And so you know,
right.
Every school district should have a plan for screening or should have a plan for responding if they have a confirmed case. But what that plan is and what's in that plan has to take into account the local context and the local communities. So having it is one thing, being explicit and directive and having those tight requirements on how it is done has to be up to our local school districts.
Kirsten, this is Jim Johnson. I got a couple of questions if you have a moment.
Sure do. Good afternoon, Jim. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. I'm pretty sure we're going to see a reduction in our transportation funding coming from the state for this next school year based upon the routes we didn't run last spring. Plus, as we've started to look at what it really is going to take to reopen, we anticipate some pretty significant unanticipated costs that are going to hit our budget. Everything from protective devices, extra cleaning, and social distancing itself may create real challenges when it comes to transportation and actually class size. So my first question is, has there been any discussion about finding any additional funding? And I understand we have those CARE dollars that are going to get distributed, but I don't think that's going to cover the entire costs that districts are going to be experiencing as we reopen, especially in larger districts where I anticipate we may run a dual system. Mm-hmm. We may have in-school classes going on and distance learning happening simultaneously, which will create a need for increased staff as well. So I'm just curious if that's come up in discussions at all, in particular with the governor's office.
So I haven't visited with the governor's office about this in particular. I visited with our legislative leaders, who are actually the appropriators of the dollars and the final curators of the budget. So I have visited with our legislators about this, and they truly are understanding of those extra costs and even some of the unanticipated costs and unincurred costs as we move forward into 2021. So they are aware of it. As you know, it's a challenging year. The commodities, both energy and agriculture, are struggling, and our economy is not as robust as it has been in previous sessions. And so those are the constraints, but they are aware. On the federal level, I am a member of my association of the National Board, the Council of Chief State School Officers Board of Directors. And so I work quite closely on the federal level as we work with our federal delegates and the federal legislation. So as you know, we have been working quite closely with Senator Alexander, who is the chairman of the Senate Health and Education Committee. And he is very supportive. He looked to that association, he looked to CCSSO, my organization, to provide them a cost estimate. And just recently, the board of directors sent Senator Alexander a response to his question, and with giving him a number of what we felt that it was going to cost our local public schools in order to reopen safely and effectively during this 2021 school year. So I will continue to work with my colleagues across the nation and from all of the other states to ensure that that federal impact, those federal dollars are flowing to our local school districts, because I think it is a responsibility as we're having this national pandemic to have our federal government provide the resources that we need in our local school districts. Again, North Dakota is far better off than some states, but it's regardless of your zip code, students in every area of North Dakota and every area of this country need to be safe when they return to schools, and those people in schools, whether it be distance learning or in-person learning, need to have what's going to be necessary to educate them and keep them safe. So I'll keep you posted on that as well too, as school board members.
Thanks. And thanks for all you're doing.
Oh, yes. You guys definitely are. You guys are on the front lines. It's helpful for me to know what you're doing. So the gratitude goes right back. So I have a couple questions here that I want to get to in the chat. Are you planning on setting out a press release outlining these timelines and considerations? Actually, no press release at this time, because essentially the timeline is truly essentially in the governor's hands and our state health officer, Dr. Andrew Stahl. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to send out a press release about another agency or another executive office's timelines. I could say what I anticipate, but again, that would not be staying in my lane to give a timeline to our governor or state health officer. So essentially, I'm just trying to keep the educational stakeholders informed via these calls and these opportunities to be informed via this way. But again, the governor's office and our state health officer are really setting the timelines for us. Next question. Will districts continue to use contingency learning plans for students and IEPs, or is there a different recommendations for students receiving special services? So again, the answers for the IEPs and the students receiving special education services, our local school districts will again be charged with making those determinations. Again, knowing that there needs to be a plan to address our students and IEPs, our local school districts will need to determine how they do that within the federal expectations and the state guidelines that are governing students with special needs. And so again, local school districts will need to use the guidance from our federal expectations and state expectations to determine the how of the plan that they will be delivering these services. Again, the what comes from state and federal guidelines, the how comes from our local school district's decision making. If someone missed the 2020 graduation celebration held at the state level on May 30th, 2020, is it accessible for viewing now? Yes, I would just reach out to Forum Communications. They have a couple different options. I think they have the option of online viewing, as well as I purchased a DVD for my historical perspective, for my memorabilia box. And so yes, the graduation celebration is available from Forum Communications. I would just reach out to Forum Communications. Patty, you might want to look up that contact information and place that in the chat box as well. And then we can read it out loud for those that are just listening. Forum Communications contact information. Do you recommend local districts start getting their own local task force together to start talks as to what things they might look like? 100%, I recommend that. I would recommend that you include your faculty, your staff, your community leaders, your families, your students to begin with, begin having those conversations about what might be appropriate for you to begin discussing. I think that is a great idea. I believe that's all. Those are all the questions in the chat box. I'll wait for some more, or I will wait for someone to ask their question via phone.
Ms. Basler?
Yes.
Hi, Chris Stout, the Grand Forks School Board. In your conversations with North Dakota United, faculty and staff who may have underlying causes, have there been discussions about those faculty and staff who may have apprehension about returning and what the legalities of that are or what the processes would be?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And thanks for joining us from Grand Forks. So yes, obviously there will be a number of staff, faculty, and students who have some serious and significant health conditions that put them at greater and higher risk. And so I do know that the conversations have included the element that districts must have a plan in order to address and deal with those students, faculty, and staff that have those underlying health conditions, and how our school districts will continue to ensure that those students with those conditions are kept safe while still receiving the education that is afforded to them as their right, in addition to staff. I mean, someone had actually just said in passing, wouldn't it be nice if 10% of our teaching staff matched up to 10% of our students that needed those services and needed to continue distance or remote learning? I'm sure it won't come out as neat and tidy as that, but school districts will need to begin to problem solve and develop solutions and plans at their local level of how they will address that.
Thank you, and also thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. And again, to Senator Lee's point, how that plan is developed and what will need to be in place, I anticipate will be significantly different in Grand Forks, Fargo, West Fargo, Bismarck than it will in my hometown of Flasher.
Kirsten, this is Rebecca Knutson again.
Okay. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I just wanted to mention as a resource, information that is being offered through the National School Boards Association. Yesterday, I attended a virtual seminar that was regarding transportation. So, Jim, when you brought up the transportation issue, that reminded me of the conversation that I listened in on yesterday. And I would say it just helped broaden my thinking a little bit more in terms of all of the details that need to be taken into consideration just regarding busing our students back and forth. And, you know, if any learning that we can garner from that source, I think it's useful to have. And they mentioned that some guidelines were going to be put together and available next week. I'm not quite sure how that information is going to be distributed, but it kind of sounded like almost a checklist, kind of to help guide in some decision making and, you know, thinking things through locally. So certainly not anything prescriptive, but in terms of checkpoints to think through as we're making decisions. And I guess during a time when we're all looking to learn information and we're all, you know, kind of seeking new ways to do things, just a reminder that free webinars, free seminars from NSBA could potentially be extremely valuable.
I appreciate that very much, Rebecca. As a board member, I was always hungry for information and educating myself, as we expect our principals, our superintendents, and our teachers to have continuous improvement and attend professional development. I felt that that was a responsibility as a school board member as well. And so those webinars are a great resource. Your comment led me to remembering something that I think is important for us to have a conversation about, that at the task force meeting there, during that day, it just so happened that the North Dakota Safety Council was conducting webinars for custodians, for superintendents, for buildings and grounds people. And there was a bit of confusion. So I just want to take a moment, if I can, to talk about those opportunities. So there is an organization in North Dakota that is a nonprofit organization called the North Dakota Safety Council. And the North Dakota Safety Council has been putting on webinars for businesses reopening, for restaurants reopening, and they've recently put together some training webinars and some informational webinars specifically addressing school reopening and transportation issues for schools. And so they used the North Dakota Smart Restart K-12 guidance that School Boards Association, DPI, Department of Health, NDCEL and ND United had contributed to North Dakota Coordination Council. They use that guidance as kind of a framework and a starting point to develop the curriculum and information for their webinars. And so in their advertisements, they include Department of Health, they include DPI, I believe they include NDSBA as well on their advertisement. But I just want to help everyone here understand that the North Dakota Safety Council is not a state agency. And they're not even a governmental agency. And so although they have used some government or official state produced documents to inform their webinars, to create their presentations, it is not something that is a checklist that is required by the state Department of Health or the Department of Public Instruction or the governor's office. It is there based upon their areas of expertise and our guidance. It's their best practice recommendations, and it's their opportunity to share with you what they think you may need as a local school district. But I just want to be very clear that that recommendation and those webinars are not endorsed or produced by the state governor's office, DPI, or DOH. And again, those recommendations are things that you as local school board members can take back and determine what might be acceptable or appropriate at your local school district level. So again, just not to confuse they're a nonprofit organization that does actually fee for services for training. And they are doing those webinars based on some documents produced by the state, but it's not a requirement of either my office, Department of Health, or the governor's office. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I also wanted to share a piece of information. As a direct result of these conversations, there was a recommendation from a school board member that encouraged the governor to do a proclamation thanking our broadband providers and broadband companies from across the state for getting our students in North Dakota up and running and some of our teachers up and running. Less than 1% of our students did not have access to broadband connectivity during this pandemic, the initial phase this last spring semester. And so just yesterday, I received a copy from the governor's office of the initial draft of that proclamation. So stay tuned. We're working again with our broadband companies to make sure that the language is right and that we have everything right. But thank you to the school board members that have participated in this call for bringing to the governor's office to our office, being able to work with the governor's office, the idea of a state proclamation thanking our broadband providers for their time, oftentimes donated time, donated services, and donated equipment. So that'll be forthcoming from the governor's office soon as well. So thank you for that. There's an update on that. Couple more questions. Would it be appropriate to utilize the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed for online learning opportunities if school move forward towards a high flex model, both online and in person? Okay. I'm really excited about this question because the governor and I have again been partnering on an opportunity to provide to our schools, to actually every single student in the state of North Dakota, partnering with the Center for Distance Ed, our North Dakota IT agency, so multiple government agencies coming together to provide for every one of our school students in the state of North Dakota the opportunity that we have never had before in the state of North Dakota at no cost to our families. Some of our families may choose to utilize it as an augmentation. Some of our families may choose or some of our school districts may choose to do it as their main delivery of curriculum, or some may choose to augment it. But I can't say a lot more about that right now because we're in the middle of an RFP process with a request for procurement. And so I just want to say to whoever that question was from, that we are definitely in support of that idea, not only for our students returning to in-person instruction, but they may need like a personal track, and instead of having their parents pay for something at Sylvan, that they might be able to leverage this for the center through the Center for Distance Ed. And for those circumstances where we don't know if we'll have to go into complete disruption again, but maybe something will be in place. And so again, the DPI and the governor's office are working to use some of our CARES dollars to provide that as a service through our Center for Distance Ed to every family, every student in the state of North Dakota. So good question. Sean, who made the governor shut down schools in the first place? So essentially, I'm going to go back in time. On March 13th, the governor had a press conference at which time he determined that closing schools should be a local decision. So March 13th, he had a press conference outlining the decision tree that each school district should use to determine whether their county or their community was under the threat of COVID, and they needed to use a certain decision tree scenario in order to make the decision about closing. That was March 13th, about 4 p.m. March 14th, Minnesota chose to close down their schools on a statewide basis, and there was a large number of confirmed cases along our border schools. There were also confirmed cases that appeared in some of our North Dakota communities for the first time. There was a large influx of calls from our from our local school superintendents saying that normally they appreciated the opportunity to make schools closures decisions on a local basis, but they felt that at this point in time, this shouldn't be a school district by school district decision, that it needed to be a statewide decision made by the governor. The governor contemplated the data and the information coming in from both the Adjutant General of the North Dakota National Guard, as well as State Health Officer Tufte, Mylene Tufte at the time, and determined Sunday evening on March 15th that given the number of students coming back from spring break statewide, the low number of cases or tests that had been run, I think at that time there were only 100 tests that had been conducted, COVID tests that had been conducted, that wasn't a large enough data set to make a decision about opening or closing, or to have our school districts have the data sets that they needed. And on Sunday, March 15th, the governor closed schools for 4 days to allow our school districts to plan what they would need to do for an extended period of closing. On March 19th, he closed schools indefinitely. So that's how the governor led to his decision to close schools indefinitely. So the governor wasn't really forced to shut down schools in the first place. He was responding to the local school superintendent's requests to have a statewide decision, and he made that decision based on data that he received from the state health officer and the Attorney General Al Dorman, not Attorney General, Adjutant General Al Dorman. Good questions. I see someone maybe trying to ask a question. Well, hearing no more questions or seeing any new questions in the chat box, we are at our time that we allotted. It is 12:56. Thank you so very much for your participation today. Thank you for the questions that you asked. Most importantly, thank you for your partnership in this. Thank you for being the leaders within your communities that you are. Please know that this doesn't have to be the only time that we answer your questions. Every single person at the Department of Public Instruction is here to serve our school districts so that our school districts can serve our families and students that they educate. So please know that if there's a question that you didn't think of today or came to you as an elected board member yourself, reach out to our office anytime, call, email, or text any of us, and we will do what we can to get you the answers and the information that you need in order to help your students and their families within your school districts. So thank you. I want to wish all of you a happy Independence Day. I think it's pretty important to note that we were the first nation in the world to offer a free education, a free public education to every citizen. I'm very proud of that every Independence Day. It makes me, it's what makes me very proud to be an American. So, and also the mother of 3 boys. I also have to say, be safe on these holidays with lots of explosive and things going off. I always was appreciative on July 5th when all of my family members woke up with both eyes and 10 fingers and 10 toes. So be safe, but have fun with your family and friends. Take care. Bye-bye.